Okay. Our featured article is, or featured passage rather, the healing of the centurion servant. Okay. I presented this in the um, AGST um, theological paper presentation. Okay. That was 2022. Okay, this is the abstract. This research will focus on the Galilean ministries of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. This paper uses sociological analysis, particularly on the value of altruism. The objectives of this research are to write a paper in the light of Asian values and to show that the Great Commission necessitates the proclamation of the gospel and social action. And so altruism is the act of helping people in need without expecting anything in return. It comes when it is needed. It does not discriminate self-seeking or delay. In addition to the general understanding of altruism, this research will also study altruism from the lens of the Filipino value of kagandahang loob. So the word maganda refers to beautiful. The basic meaning of loob means inside or inner space. Connotatively, loob may refer to the human soul, mind, or will. The ministries of Jesus conducted in Galilee can be considered manifestations of God's kagandahang loob. So it might be foreign to our friends from Myanmar, but it is the combination ganda and then loob. The key to understanding the study can be found in Matthew 9:36. I cite here, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. The ministries conducted in Galilee include healing the sick, feeding the crowds, and delivering people from the bondage of evil spirits. The featured story in this presentation is the healing of the centurion servant, Matthew 8:5-13. The appeal of this research is to show that kagandahang loob results in social action. The mandate of making disciples of all nations should include the imperative of social action. There is from Pitirim A. Sorokin, his critique of ethnocentrism in the book The Ways and Power of Love, laments that the roots of many of the world's wars and racial conflicts go back to the concept of exclusivity. He said, if unselfish love does not extend over the whole world, it is confined within one group, a given family, tribe, nation, race, religious denomination, political party, trade union, or caste, or a social class, or any part of humanity. Such in-group altruism tends to generate an out-group antagonism. I say that again. An in-group altruism or a focus on a particular group generates an out-group antagonism, which means everyone else that is not part of your group or community is not important. And the more intense and exclusive the in-group solidarity of its members, the more unavoidable are the clashes between the group and the rest of humanity. So why is there a need for altruism? Sorokin criticized the nature of altruism that looks only towards the needs of an in-group. Okay? From an ethnic level, it may lead to patriotism on the one hand, but racial discrimination on the other. Colin Grant shares in this observation, saying, the ills of the contemporary life are largely traceable to a deficiency of altruism. To rephrase his statement, many of the societal problems would have been resolved if people were practicing altruism toward one another. This research is composed of 5 parts. The first part is a discussion of the definitions of altruism. The second part introduces the Filipino concept of kagandahang loob. The third part briefly describes, so I think we already discussed this in our first part. And then a first part of our lecture today. And then the fourth part is a discussion of the ministries of altruism. The fifth is a conclusion. So what is altruism? Auguste Comte, the father of sociology, created the term altruiste in 1852. Altruism is related to the phrase alter ego, built up from two words, ego, which is the self, and then the Latin word to alter, change as in the English, alteration. In Comte's mind, the adjective of egoistic was taken negatively to mean self-centered or self-oriented. On the other hand, alter ego is other-oriented or concerned about the welfare of others. So the definition of altruism introduced by Comte was developed by sociologists and psychologists who followed him. These are further definitions of altruism and its groups. According to their authors, altruism as a philosophy, the definition of altruism by authors can be divided into 4 groups. The first group of authors understood altruism as a philosophy. Peter Singer, effective altruism is based on a very simple idea. We should do the most good we can. For Thomas Nagel, altruism is not abject self-sacrifice but merely a willingness to act in consideration of the interests of other persons without the need of ulterior motives. The second group sees altruism as motivation. Daniel Batson also defined altruism as a motivational state with the ultimate goal of increasing another's welfare. And Birgitta Pesci, altruism usually refers to actions that take other human beings into consideration, actions concerned with the well-being of others. Further, William Kornblum defined altruism as the ability to feel the pain of others and act on their behalf. So there is a feeling of pain that results in action. And then Lynn Underwood also sees altruism built upon values such as agape, compassion, unconditional love, and self-giving love. Third, altruism seen as cooperative behavior. According to John Pilch, altruism is an escapable obligation incumbent upon more fortunate group members in society. Anyone with a personal surplus will normally feel shame and or be considered greedy or rapacious if that surplus is not shared with the less fortunate neighbors. Now with Christopher Boehm, altruism may refer either to acts of costly generosity towards specific unrelated individuals or to sacrifices of personal interest as the individual contributes to enterprises that benefit the community as a whole. The fourth group of definition of altruism is that it can also mean a potential harm to the giver. Okay. Fourth group saw that altruism can bring potential harm to the altruist. For example, Edith Wiskogrod, an action favoring other individuals at the expense of the altruist. Elliot Sober, an altruistic behavior enhances the fitness of someone else at some cost in fitness to the donor. So the donor loses while the receiver gains something. Nigel Barber, actions that help another individual at some cost to the altruist, which is similar to the previous. And then Matthew Ricard, Altruism is not mere action, for an act cannot be counted as altruistic if it does not bear a risk and has no cost. He adds it is the motivation that colors our actions. Now we go over to kagandahang loob as Filipino altruism. Loob or inner space. Loob means inside, as in loob ng bahay, inside the house, or loob ng bote, inside the bottle. Loob refers to the inner person or inner self as opposed to lamang loob, internal organs. Okay. In 1974, Leonardo and Mercado proposed that loob is an essential component in Filipino philosophy. He said that Filipinos understand the human person as an individual from two viewpoints, the loob and the body. Okay? The body, the physical one, and what is inside of it. Loob is the inner self, the core of one's personhood, and where the true worth of a person lies. Loob is interpersonal, considers the kapwa, and is manifested through external behavior. Dioniso Miranda describes love as human interiority, the core of a person's consciousness. Now we go on kapwa, which has something to do with after loob is kapwa or pakikipagkapwa. The Tagalog Dictionary of Vito Santos renders kapwa as a fellow being. Kapwa is viewed by the Filipino as connected with his or her inner self. So the sense of interpersonalism with Filipinos considers the shared identities with their kapwa. Each individual is a tao, and the other person is a kapwa-tao. As an important concept in the Filipino psyche, Enriquez mentioned that the understanding of kapwa begins in oneself. And so from kapwa to pakikipagkapwa, or helping behavior, or becoming interpersonal in some sense. From kapwa, the verb pakikipagkapwa means establishing a good relationship. Enriquez highlighted pakikipagkapwa as one of the important Filipino virtues. Pakikipagkapwa means accepting and dealing with the other person as an equal. If every individual possesses human dignity, then the kapwa-tao also shares the same dignity. In pakikipagkapwa, fellow human beings disregard all the socio-political differences such as race, gender, or educational attainment. Levi Laneria adds, kapwa has the intimations of equality, hence pakikipagkapwa in its profound meaning is two co-equal persons relating to one another. Because kapwa is a shared or collective identity, the interests of the community outweigh personal interests. I say that again. The personal interest is less important. What is more important is the community's interest. So this commitment to the kapwa as an equal companion shows that any person is forbidden from treating one's kapwa as an object that can be exploited or manipulated. Filipino sociologists and psychologists also have seen the interconnected link between the values of loob and kapwa. For example, Loob and Kapwa by Jeremiah Reyes argues that these two values described earlier serve as pillars for a special collection of virtues which are not individualistic. He also believes that the Filipino understanding of loob is based on the view of Thomas Aquinas as substance in a relation. For Aquinas, charity and justice are the two important virtues which are exercised by the will of a person to another person or even towards God. Reyes also saw kagandahang loob as character leading to acts of altruism. Now, about ganda, the word ganda or kagandahang loob in the features of ganda. Jose de Mesa and Rebecca Cacho said the relational notion of kagandahang loob comes from two concepts, love and ganda. The word ganda means beautiful. Beauty is being compared to goodness or goodwill. A person with a beautiful character is admirable. So any deed can be considered beautiful when done for the betterment or for the advantage of others. So kagandahang loob reinforces their fellow beings, encourages and establishes their human dignity. Kagandahang loob can be manifested into these values: caring about others' needs, malasakit, demonstrating respect for others, paggalang, helping others without expecting return, tumutulong ng walang kapalit. So, ministries of altruism in Galilee. This is a table that I did about the ministries of altruism in Galilee, which covers many passages within the gospel narratives. No? Healings in the first column, healing of a leper, a centurion servant, a paralytic, the ruler's daughter, and a woman suffering from hemorrhage, two blind men, a man with a withered hand healed on a Sabbath. There were exorcisms, two demon-possessed men in the Gadarenes, a man possessed by a demon which causes muteness, the daughter of a Canaanite woman. Care for the marginalized includes Jesus eating with tax collectors and sinners, and then the passage, disciples plucking grain on a Sabbath, and then feeding of the multitudes, feeding of the 5,000, and feeding of the 4,000. The Gospels portray Jesus as the suffering servant of Isaiah, who carried with himself the aches and the pains, the tears and fears, the burden of the people. Jesus was compassionate to the crowds because he saw them harassed with no one to help them. So the ministry of healings, exorcism, feeding show that the altruism of Jesus involved everyone in society. So the Lord excluded no one. He reached out to men, women, children, the sick, the well, the people in authority, the masses, the tax collectors, lepers, Gentiles, and those who cannot see, they cannot walk, they could not talk, they could not get up by themselves. So because of the limited time available, our featured passage will be on the healing of the centurion's servant, Matthew 8:5-13. Now this is, okay, and again, excuse me, again, because this is our featured passage, it deserves a reading of scripture, okay? So Matthew 8, Matthew 8:5-13. It says, when he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly. And he said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion replied, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, Go, and he goes, and to another, Come, and he comes, and to my servant, Do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And to the centurion Jesus said, Go, let it be done for you as you have believed. And the servant was healed at that very moment. So here we see a centurion coming to Jesus for help. The centurion of Jesus means he returned to his hometown after preaching the Sermon of the Mount, that is the previous passage from Matthew 5-7. This story also appears in Luke 7:1-10 with some slight variations. A centurion came to Jesus for help, and a centurion was a Roman officer with a middle rank who commands about 60 to 80 troops. The Roman legion may be composed of 4,800 infantry, including about 120 men on horseback. So a legatus legionis was considered the supreme commander of one or more legions stationed in the province. Pontius Pilate can be considered as the legatus, no, during Jesus' time. There are 5 accounts of centurions in the New Testament. First, we can see here Matthew 8, and I combined it with Luke 7, the healing of a centurion servant. Later, in the Passion narrative, Matthew 27, and then Mark 15, Luke 23, a centurion at the cross. In chapter 3 of Acts, the centurion Cornelius, to whom Peter visited. And then Acts 22, the centurion guarding Paul. And later, the centurion whose name was Julius from the Augustan cohort, who accompanied Paul until they reached Rome. Following the narrative sequence, it appears that Jesus had just come down from the mountain and just arrived in his hometown. Jesus may have walked a long way on foot. A leper came and Jesus healed this man. After healing the man with leprosy, this centurion came to him. Jesus said to the centurion, I will come and heal him. With his response, we can see the willingness of Jesus to help people in need. A person with empathy would feel a sense of urgency and would not waste time until he or she can provide the help that is needed. If Jesus delayed here, the servant may have died. So the centurion said to Jesus, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. During his stay in the Jewish country, the centurion was already familiar that Jews do not enter into the houses of Gentiles. Peter stated this tradition to Cornelius, a centurion. Peter said in Acts 10, you yourself know that it's unlawful for a Jew to associate with or visit a Gentile. The Jews believe that they will be ceremonially unclean once they enter the house of a Gentile or eat with them. The centurion might have heard also how Jesus commands sickness to flee, just as what happened to the leper previously, Matthew 8, 1-4, verse 4. So the centurion believed that the process of commanding Roman soldiers would be the same as commanding the sickness to leave from the body. So the centurion said, when I say to this one, go, he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. So moreover, the centurion believed that Jesus has the authority to command healing even at a distance. That is the setting between Jesus, what separates Jesus and the servant who was suffering with sickness rather. So Jesus said, truly I tell you, I have found no one in Israel with such great faith. So the construction of the statement coming from the centurion was a result of his giving of authority. Such a statement coming from Jesus may also have surprised the witnesses because the centurion was a Gentile and a pagan, and to call him having a great faith, no, in Israel. Craig Evans proposed that if the centurion helped build the synagogue, it is possible that he also attended there. So in other words, there was a moment, no, that the centurion, upon his hearing, we remember faith comes through hearing, according to Paul in Romans chapter 10. And so that it is possible that this centurion also learn or absorb, no, the faith of the Jews that who preach the Hebrew Bible in the synagogue. Jesus honored the centurion before everyone because he trusted in what the Lord can do. In addition to being concerned with the well-being of kapwa, altruism is also appreciative of others. Meaning egoism or self-centeredness brags of self-achievement. Jesus did not say, I am great because I am God. What he said, you have great faith. He channeled the attention to the faith of the centurion, not towards himself. So Jesus also assured the centurion of a trustworthy saying. He used the word, he spoke the word rather, the word amen, which is a meaning truly the equivalent in Hebrew. In this case, amen means there is no reason to doubt the sincere faith of the centurion. Kagandaang loob is a virtue of sincerity. We can also note a reversal on the idea of welcome or hospitality. Remember, the sick servant was in the home of the centurion. The centurion was ashamed of bringing Jesus into his home because of being unworthy. He said, I am not worthy to receive you. His unworthiness, instead of him welcoming Jesus in his home, it was Jesus who gave the centurion a welcome to the Christian faith. Though he came from another tribe, he is a Roman citizen, or a Roman soldier, or someone coming from a different tribe who serves the Romans, and he corresponds with a different religion. Jesus declared him a part of the family of God. Jesus said, I tell you, many will come from the east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus did not ask the centurion for anything. The Lord just wanted to help. It was given out of his free decision. So finally, Jesus assured the centurion that his request was granted. Go, let it be done as you believe. And so we see kagandaang loob also includes assuring people. The servant of the centurion was healed from a near-death experience, from his paralysis and mental illness. People can read the story theologically. Jesus is our healer, and he is able to command sickness to flee even from a distance. Craig Keener also invites the readers from a missional perspective. He said, by including this story from his source, Matthew encourages his Jewish Christian readers in the Gentile mission. Even a single exception should be enough to challenge racist stereotypes, such as this story. From a socio-political view, Jesus was aiding, or he was helping, Roman officers who were the colonizers and national enemies of the Jews. But for Jesus, everyone deserves a chance, even for centurions who work for the oppressors of Jews. The activities of Jesus in the ministries of Galilee are both missional and altruistic. And so, when Jesus saw the crowds, he wanted to help them. They were helpless, harassed without a shepherd. No? So the Lord commissioned his disciples to go into the harvest field. Jesus set an example of for mercy and kindness. The following questions often challenge us the way we do ministry. Are we only going to minister to the soul and not to the body? Are we going to help only those who can help us back? And I remember that was one of the focuses of when we say, are we able to love only for people who are able to love us back? That is mentioned in the Sermon of the Mount. Are we afraid to bear pain or make sacrifices for others? That is one. That comes as the fourth definition of the meaning of altruism, is that it also it results in a disadvantage, no, to one who gives. This is why our ministry should not be confined only to preaching, but also to reaching out to the sick, feeding the hungry, liberating others from all forms of oppression. So if I'd be given the chance to appeal, we should start in humility and unlearn many things that may hinder us from helping those in need. And by humility, it allows us to see clearly what should be done. When we give to others, we are not bitter because we know that God will always outmatch our giving. Finally, Jesus said, "Go and make disciples." But he also said we should teach everything he commanded us to do. The commission also includes performing kagandaang loob. Gentlemen and lady, this is our presentation for today. So what are your implications, class? What can you say? Pastor Mark, Pastor Don, and Sister Esther, about what we just studied about the story of the healing of the centurion servant.
First of all, I can say that just Jesus is willing to help even those who are not his followers yet.
Yes.
Just willing to help anybody in need. And it was bolstered by the extraordinary faith of the centurion that he believes that it could be done even from long distance, which is really something, something commendable.
Correct.
Because most people believes only when they see with their own eyes. But this man, the centurion, believes even in a long distance effect.
Yes.
And so this is a very great example of faith that could be teach to people until now, until this time, our time.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Later, everyone, including Kuya Don, I will ask you how can we apply, no? How can we apply the principles that we've learned today? Sige, from the story. Sige, Pastor Mark or Sister Esther?
Yeah. We learned that the century servant is healed by Jesus Christ. I believe that the century is not a believer, but still he have faith in Jesus Christ that he can heal his servant even from a distance. So his belief, and even though he is not a believer, but he still believes Jesus Christ. So as a believer, even the unbeliever believe what Jesus can do. So we need to believe more than that. What Jesus power or Jesus miracle in our life. That is what I learned. The centurion's person.
Thank you. And